welcome back to Beamweller Reviews, everybody. Today we've got the massive big game cover art Predator from Prime One Studio. Now this is a statue that I have been absolutely jacked up for the last couple years, and I first saw it with my own eyes at the 2019 Wonder Festival in hot, stinking hot Tokyo, Japan. And my wife happened to be with me at that event, and we were just cruising around the show floor, checking out all the cool stuff, and I basically stopped dead in my tracks as soon as I saw this. I turned to her and said, I don't care how much that statue costs, we're getting it. And she just kind of shrugged her shoulders and sighed because she can't stop the inevitable, right? Turns out I had to stay true to my word, because once you add in the exorbitant, kind of sketchy shipping cost increase, this is now the most expensive statue that I've ever bought. So is it worth the money? We'll discuss that. Plus, this is the deluxe bonus version, so it's got, count them, 4 different portrait options and 4 different left-hand display options. So I'm going to have a different one in each segment of this review, so pay attention to those. Now, let's stop wasting time. Let's get into the review. Alright, I think most people are familiar with Predator from the movie franchise, which started off with the 1987 cinematic classic starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, simply titled Predator. There's been several sequels and a couple of Alien vs. Predator movies since then, so the franchise has been rolling along pretty steadily for the last few decades. But the story and the world building around the Predators, or the Yautja as their species is known, has really taken place in the comics. And as this statue's name would imply, it's based on the 4-issue miniseries from 1991 called Predator Big Game. And I still have my copies from when I was a kid. One of my favorite covers is issue number 1. Prime One has already based a statue off of this one. This statue, though, is based on the cover to issue number 2. And you can see the similarities in the pose and the giant spear in his hand and the biomask as well. And I always loved these comics as a kid because, not only did they have exceptional artwork, they were pretty violent and bloody, and it made me feel like a real badass hiding that from my mom and dad. Not that they really would have cared, but hey, I felt pretty cool at the time, right? But I think I speak for most collectors, especially myself, in saying that I did not buy this statue for its resemblance to the comic books. I bought it for its remarkable similarity to the Predator from that very first movie, now known as The Jungle Hunter. And Prime One themselves even used that in their marketing. They're like, hey, well, it's a comic book cover, but look how much it looks like the one from the movie. And they even put, these little dog tags here, and you can place them around the base that say Jim Hopper, who's a character, referenced in the movie. So definitely a lot of similarities to that Jungle Hunter Predator. And I will never forget the first time that I saw Predator. I was maybe 8 or 9 years old, which is maybe a little bit young to watch that movie, but we had a pretty liberal local video rental place that would pretty much let us rent anything outside of the porno section. So, my buddies and I, in the summers, we'd go around and make our way through all the R-rated horror movies and action movies, and eventually came to Predator. And remember, there's no internet back in those days, and no Facebook, no spoilers, so we truly had no idea what the Predator was at that time. And this movie basically sucked me in right from the start, right from that opening handshake / arm wrestle between Schwarzenegger and Carl Weathers, who were just both absolutely shredded at the time. I mean, this is basically a superhero movie before the superhero movie craze. And, we have this elite team of commando bodybuilders going into the jungle just armed to the teeth. You have Jesse Ventura with his minigun that he nicknamed Old Painless. You had Billy with his almost superhuman Wolverine-style tracking senses. But there's always this sense of evil, the sense of dread among them as this invisible creature hunts them down and picks them off one by one. And I'll never forget the final action scene where the Predator deems Dutch worthy of a one-on-one battle. And he takes the shoulder cannon off, drops it in the water, starts undoing the mask, and with each button there's a spout of steam that shoots out. Finally he takes it off and you get a glimpse at the unmasked portrait. And at first I remember thinking, like, that's kind of a letdown, but then he opens up the mouth and starts roaring and just starts pummeling on Arnold like he's a rag doll. It's just an epic moment, and one that I think I will remember forever. Now, what you want to know is this statue going to stay in my collection forever? Well, let's not waste any more time. Let's get into the review and start off with Sculpt and Design next. Alright, Pinewood Studio generally uses a team of sculptors on most of their statues, so I'm not sure who the complete team is that worked on this piece, but I do know that it was primarily sculpted by a man named Romel Chopra, who also did the XM Studios Brown Wolverine and has a number of other great statues under his belt as well. So I showed you earlier the comic book cover that this statue is based on, but one thing you got to notice about that cover is it doesn't really show what he's standing on. So they had to develop this base specifically for the statue. And I think they did an amazing job here. So you've got the big rock formation primarily, but they've spiced it up with quite a lot of extra detail, with the branches and vines that kind of run their way around this rock. You've got the skulls and the bones kind of laying around the base at his feet. You've got a snake here slithering on the branch, and if you turn into the back, there's actually a scorpion on the rock back here. And you'll remember that scene from the movie where Max sort of skewers the scorpion off of Dylan's shoulder. So another tie back to the movie there. You've got the dog tags that I mentioned earlier. I like to place those in this puddle of blood here, kind of front and center on the base. These skulls around his feet are loose pieces, so be careful with those, but you can place them kind of anywhere you want on the base. You'll notice the bright green plants all around here, and these are all kind of plastic, kind of like a fake house plant style. There are instructions on how to place them in the base, but I found it a little hard to follow, so I just kind of put them in wherever I thought looked good. I wanted to keep the bigger ones at the back here so I didn't block all of these nice details, but I really love that nice pop of green color that they add to the statue. One of my favorite things here about the base is this water effect on the front here. Now, apparently as they were filming the movie, that water that they were in was pretty rank, like full of leeches, and it just stunk. You don't get quite that level of realism here, but a really nice effect there on the base. So I love this base. I think they did a fantastic job with it. The Predator himself, the pose is pretty much predetermined from that big game cover. But they really amped up the details on this guy. They did an amazing job. Now, it's interesting to note that the Predator design for the movie was originally looking nothing like this. It was kind of more of a smaller creature, kind of bug-like. They wanted him to look swift and nimble. And in fact, the actor inside the Predator suit was originally Jean-Claude Van Damme. So thank God they changed it to this design that we have here. Now, this is the type of design that, although it's one of my favorite, probably my very favorite creature design of all time, if you didn't know what he looked like and I tried to describe it to you, you'd probably laugh at me. I mean, think about it. He's got this big bulbous spotted head, the sunken eye sockets, 4 big teeth that kind of look like fingers. He's got spikes instead of eyebrows, and on top of all that, a glorious mane of dreadlocks. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but it's just the right blend of ridiculous elements to make it awesome. I also like this blend of sort of alien looking technology. You got the shoulder cannon, the bomb gauntlet here, the retractable blades, and you blend that with this more primitive, almost tribal look. You got the skull necklace, the netting, the sandals. I mean, the Predator is just such an awesome classic monster design, and there's so much here to talk about. I don't think I can fit it all in, so I'll just say that Prime One and their team did a remarkable job bringing this monster to life. Alright, so as we move on to talk about paint here, I will mention that, I am a lifelong Predator fan, but I don't consider myself one of the hardcore Predator fans. I know there are some Predator collectors out there who will criticize the shape and placement of every dot on his head, and that's totally fine, but I'm not quite at that level. My main concern was with some of the early photos of the statue that popped up that showed the entire dot pattern kind of veering out of alignment, and that really concerned me, and I was worried about it because that would be grounds for a return or replacement of the statue. But overall, mine is aligned pretty well, so I'm pretty happy with the paint job of the skin overall. Could it be better? Of course. I think the veins inside the mouth could be done a little bit better. I think the skin looks kind of flat and dry, and I always pictured the skin being, slightly slimy and wet. So I think they could have done a better job with that. But as I said, overall, I'm pretty happy with it. And the rest of the statue looks pretty good as well. You got this nice worn metallic finish on all the armor. The freshly extracted human spine and skull has a nice glossy, bloody finish to it. The base looks great too. I mean, it's primarily a big hunk of gray rock, but there's a little bit of bits of color all over the base. I mentioned, this puddle of blood here. There's some green moss. You got the bones as well. So overall, there's really not much to complain about here in terms of paint. All right, so before we get into the production and build quality of the statue, you'll notice the Gort mask, as it's known on the statue here. This was the original mask design that was going to be used in the movie, but I read that they scrapped it because the front of this mask mimicked the mandibles of the unmasked creature too closely. And remember, in those days, that was a major spoiler for the movie, so they scrapped it for the more recognizable biomask that we saw in the movie. This mask was worn in Predator 2 towards the end of the movie, and also in the first Alien vs. Predator, though, so it does have some movie lineage to it. Now, the statue itself does come with a setup guide. The pictures are pretty small, it's a little tricky to follow, and there's only 87 steps in putting this statue together, so I'm not going to get into too much detail about how to assemble the piece. I will say, make sure you set aside a good couple hours to unbox and assemble this piece. It's going to take you a while. Couple things to note about the quality of this piece. The pieces are very solid and sturdy feeling. It's a big, heavy statue. Make sure you got a nice strong shelf to display it on. All the pieces fit together really nice. There's no ugly seams anywhere. The magnets are really strong, especially at this left hand. Make sure you're very careful when you're trying to remove that hand. You don't want to yank it off and smash it into the table or something like that. It does have a light up feature. There's a little button on the gauntlet here. You can light that up. This takes 2 LR44 batteries. You can light up the shoulder cannon with another little button there. That takes 2 LR41 batteries. And then the alternate biomask has a light up feature here with a button on the side. You can light up the targeting sights, and this takes 2 AAA batteries, so 3 different styles of batteries. You'll notice the little headstand here. With the deluxe version, you actually get 3 of these, so you can display all 4 portraits with the statue at the same time, which is an awesome idea. All right, another thing to note is different materials used on this statue. You've got the fabric netting over his body. The 2 retractable blades are actually metal. And the hair and the quills on his face are kind of a rubbery material, which is actually a good idea because this space here between the shoulder cannon and his head is quite narrow, and you're going to need a little bit of flex in that hair possibly to get some of the heads fully onto the body. So really like what they did with the materials on this statue. As I said, it is a really nice, good quality piece. I've really got nothing to complain about there. Great production from Prime One Studio. All right, it is time to wrap up this review. The big game cover art Predator from Prime One Studio. And when you consider that this is a factory produced statue of a character that is notoriously difficult to pull off, I think Prime One Studio has done a remarkable job. I love the base on the statue. You get the realistic water effect. You got the nice green plant life to add that pop of color. I like the little Jim Hopper dog tags as a nice reference back to the movie. I mean, the statue is based on the big game cover, issue number 2, but it is that jungle hunter look that I think most collectors and Predator fans want in the statue. The details on the Predator himself are amazing. I love the different materials they used. You got the fabric netting, the metal blades, even the rubbery hair and quills are really well implemented. You got a light up feature. The statue is truly remarkable. That said, is it worth the money? That question is a little bit more difficult to answer. I think if you live in the US where you're not paying exchange rate fees and you can get the economy shipping, which I think might be available to Europe now as well, it becomes much more of a no-brainer. If you live outside of those economy shipping zones, you're paying through the nose for shipping, and you got to pay exchange rate, you got to pay import fees. This statue gets real expensive real fast. For me, I had it mostly paid off well over a year ago, so it wasn't as big of a kick to the nuts come time to ship as it could have been. So for me, a little bit easier pill to swallow with this statue, and I'm glad that I did because I'm quite happy with it. I've been looking for a Predator to add to my collection for a long, long time, and I finally got it here. I think this is a remarkable statue, as I said. Is this statue for you? Well, if you don't think you're going to have the room or maybe the money for the new upcoming 1/3 scale Predator, and I should mention that this statue is already much closer to 1/3 scale than it is 1/4, I think you seriously got to consider the big game cover art Predator right here. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the review. Stay tuned to the channel because I got a bit more coming up soon. So make sure you subscribe. We'll talk to you guys soon.